Good morning. Today is the January 6th update. This is 12 months from our first harvest. Okay, so we got 127 pounds of food out of here in this last month in the winter time. That's a lot of food for a winter garden. But we were harvesting heavy things. We harvested radishes, we harvested beets, we had spinach, kale, a little bit of collard greens. I don't have a lot of those, but we had some. We even had a few strawberries this last month. And now I'm down to only like 5 strawberries over there, and I'm not even going to pick those. I'm just going to see what they do throughout the winter, because we've had freezing temperatures in here. When it was below zero, we had -3 one night, we had -1 one night, and no row cover on that strawberry row. And the strawberries are still on the vine, still intact. So I'm just going to see what happens, because I know they froze solid those nights. It was down in probably the 20s on that row. I didn't have a thermometer, but I'm sure it got cold. So that's pretty awesome. So 127 pounds this month. That brings our yearly total for the entire year, for all 12 months, was 1,550 pounds. So 1,550 pounds out of food out of here to feed our people here on the ranch. So we fed a lot of people out of here. We ended up with 1,550 pounds out of here. Now remember, there was a lot more poundage outside, because we had a big beet crop, a carrot crop, a big potato crop outside. And then there were other garden vegetables. In the boot camp garden over by the house, there were broccoli and cabbage and other things. In here we had quite a few cabbage. So we had a substantial, good, wonderful harvest this year. And so I'm excited about that. It was great to show you the monthly update of how this all worked out, so that you can kind of see from the very first harvest, when the only plants in here was bed number 2. And then each month you can see how I plant across. And we had more and more harvests. In the summer things were tall, because we had tall pepper plants and tomatoes, and we had cucumbers that were vining out. And then it came back to winter. So now it looks kind of like it did last year, except the entire greenhouse here is filled with plants. We even have food growing in the rock wall now. But this concludes our 12-month harvest of the first year of this beautiful Wallapini style solar greenhouse. I'm not going to be doing any more monthly updates on this Wallapini from our first harvest. So what am I going to be doing next year? You know, what's coming? Because there will be a lot coming. So I have concluded my monthly updates from the shortest day of the year, and today I am concluding our monthly updates from the first harvest. So there was the shortest day of the year series I did, and there was the monthly harvest update that I did. And in the shortest day of the year, I talked about how the daylight and the day length affects different plant growth and what we should be planting and how and why. And then in the monthly updates on the harvests, I would talk about the foods that we were harvesting and eating. And so that's kind of what I did this year. And this year, I'm not going to be doing that. And that will give me time to focus on more important things. I really want to focus on how to grow the staples. What is it that we need to be doing to grow the staples to feed your family? If you're actually going to feed your family, and you're really good at growing lettuce, but you can't get anything else to grow, will lettuce alone feed your family? Because maybe you have never learned the skills to grow other things. So we don't want that to happen. We don't want anybody to go hungry. We want you to have the skills and the knowledge and everything that you need to grow the staple crops to make your garden the best garden of your entire life. Alright, so let's just think this through for a minute. what are the staples for this year? Last year, I focused on building the greenhouse and getting everything set up in here so that we could just grow food. And it's a new climate for me, because I came in June of 2020 and we started construction of this in July of 2020, and then we got the covering on in November of 2020, and I planted. Our first harvest was the 4th, that came out on the 7th of January 2021. And so for a year and a half, we've been building this greenhouse, and we have been growing the food, and we have been testing. You know, I ended up with a 300 and something, maybe close to 350 varieties of seeds that I was dealing with. Some of them I didn't grow because I had no faith in them in this climate. But I grew, certainly I grew half of those. I know I was growing over 150 varieties over the last year to test them and to see what would do well in this climate. So this year I have pared that down, and I didn't count how many varieties I'm doing, but it's probably smaller than 150 varieties. It's more like it could even be half of that. We could be at 70, 75, 80 varieties of things I'm growing this year. I'm actually going to be growing a few more potato varieties this year, and those will be outside. And we're going to be focusing on the staple crops so that you know each detail. So if there's a staple crop you want to grow, you need to let me know. You need to get in the comments of this video and say, okay, I really want to grow corn this year to make cornbread, and I want to grow celery. How do I grow celery? Because celery can be hard for people. People plant celery and it doesn't come up. Well, that's because celery seed takes light to germinate, and people will cover it with dirt and it won't germinate if it's in the darkness. So you need to know that about celery. And if you don't know that, it will be very hard to germinate celery. So you plant the celery on top, and you don't, you water it like you water all the other crops, and it still doesn't come up. That's because it dries out between waterings, because you need to keep it constantly moist, because there's no soil covering it. So celery can be a hard crop to germinate. And then once you do get it growing, you've got to keep it wet all the time. You have to water celery a lot more than any other crop, because you cannot raise celery in a dry land situation. Celery has to be watered continually. The soil has to stay wet with celery. So there are some keys and some tips about celery, but I can give you keys and tips on almost all major food crops. And if you want to grow taro, I don't know, because I don't live in Hawaii or the tropics where taro grows. I've never grown it. So if there is a crop that you want to grow and I don't know how to grow it, I will say I don't know, and we're going to leave it at that. Because one of the biggest problems in this world is when people pretend to know something and they don't. And I refuse to contribute to that kind of ignorance in this world. There's plenty of people who do that, and I don't need to join that crowd. Some of the highlights of this past year: the worm bed has done outstanding. We have an amazing amount of worms. There could be 100 or 200,000 worms in there. What if there were 1 million worms? And I'm way underestimating it. I don't know, and I'm not going to count them. But I do know that they multiply exponentially. And so we can have a lot of worms. But when I dig down in there and I pull out 100 worms and I go back, I can't even see the difference at all. So we have a lot of worms in there. So that was a great success. The little small propagation house, that has worked out very well. I would recommend a little greenhouse like this for everybody to put inside their bigger structures, because you can put a heater in there to start all of your plants for the entire year, and without heating your big greenhouse, you can heat the little one, and get all your little seedlings going. Because once you get the little seedling going in a transplant size, you can move it out into a cold house like this, where you're not heating it, and then the plants will grow and thrive. They'll grow slower in the winter, obviously, less light and less heat, but they will start growing, and you can keep a continual growth happening all the time. Another great success was the irrigation system, putting out the drip lines. Now, on one hand, they're a pain, and they're hard to handle when you're out there working and planting because they're in your way. And if you're clumsy, when you're harvesting with a knife, you can cut the line. When you're hoeing a weed, you can cut the line. But it's very nice to just come in here and turn on the water, and the whole thing waters in the summertime. So that was a success. It's not the easiest system, because if you do damage it, you have to repair it. Another success was Claytonia, which is the miner's lettuce. That was a good success for us this year. I planted it in the winter last year, and it went dormant, and I didn't cut it all down. I let some to go to seed. And those seeds blew all over this greenhouse. So they're coming up everywhere, which is a blessing at this time of year. I didn't have to plant any Claytonia, and we have been eating that. And it is like pure gold. It is good. It is yummy. It's like a lettuce with absolutely no bitterness at all. So that was a great success. The other success is this patio area where we have the chairs to sit down on. And people can come in here when it's cold and there's snow outside and ice and it's a winter wonderland and it's beautiful out there. We can come in here at night and roast hot dogs on our little propane fireplace, and we can gather here. I've had young people come in here, and they, on dates, teenagers dating, have come in here and had fun. And the kids come in here and they love it, and we've had good times with families and friends in here. We even had a family reunion who came here and enjoyed the place. So that was a success, to have a patio area. Now, if this was all growing beds right to the end, it would be hard to have a place to do things. In the summertime, I was planting trees in here. We did a lot of propagation. We had our boot camp last year towards the end of April, and we had people in here. So it was good to have a gathering place where we could do educational things. So that's been very, very good, and I'm not going to change that. What else was a success? Obviously, the crops growing have been a success. It will be interesting to see if the lemon tree is a success, because in those cold temperatures, it got to freezing temperatures in here, and I am not supplementing with any artificial heat other than the propagation house. So everything out there has to survive. I'm not going to go so far out of context in the plants I'm growing that I have to be creating heat. So it will be interesting to see what the lemon tree does. But this has been a great year. We're going to be focusing on your gardens this year and how to help you have the best garden of your life by focusing on the staple crops. What is it that you eat? So you need to make a list. Are you eating a lot of meat and potatoes with some sides of carrots? You know, some people eat that way. Well, let's teach you how to grow the best potatoes and carrots ever. Are you focusing more on the greens? Are you into lettuce and spinach, chard, kale? Are those the things that you're eating and focusing on? Let's focus on those. Are you into cabbages and broccolis and cauliflowers? Let's focus on those. But I need to know what you need focused on. So help me to help you. But the staples that I'm growing, I'm going to be sharing those things for sure. And so that'll be pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you have the best garden of your entire life this year.